Women are not interested in being with someone who is really wealthy and treat them like garbage. If you look at the sort of whom people select to have sex with versus whom people select to try and form long-term relationships with them. I mean, there are many men who would not choose to be with the woman that is most attractive to everybody because they don't have the confidence they could keep her. Even if she's not a flirt and wouldn't be looking right. Even if she didn't have a wandering eye. Some men deliberately wouldn't want to be with the most beautiful people who tend to match up pretty closely in terms of attractiveness. Yes, it's true that resource potential is an important variable because people have to think about safety and childcare, and a number of things. But women work too, right? They can opt to work and make money, but more important than any other feature across all cultures is that the woman reports that she sought someone who is kind to them. Not necessarily kind to everybody, but kind to them. To them, right. Kind to them. So even if you think of like as extreme money or you think of extreme bodies or extreme resources, right, somebody has women in terms of whom they tend to pair up with the long term. Assuming heterosexual, because here we're making a bunch of assumptions, but in that mold, what is showing up over and over again in the data is that their top priority is that someone is kind to them. In other words, they're not interested in being with someone who's really wealthy and treats them like garbage. I think this gets lost because people think, oh, it's all about money. It's not all about money. It's about safety and kindness because you're talking about a long-term bond right now that then people say, well, what about this notion of gold diggers? And by the way, they're male and female gold diggers because the last thing you want is someone with a reproductive potential resource potential who's gonna treat you like garbage. Chances are they're not gonna stay with you or you're gonna be there, but then they're gonna bring in other mates, and so that's when you look at the roots of jealousy and concerns about infidelity. Or you look at the roots of sort of like concerns about resource potential and all that. It all kind of makes sense in this very old-fashioned model. It also makes sense in the model that we live in now. Kindness toward each other is fundamentally the most important variable, which is kind of reassuring. I don't say that to be politically correct. That's how the data fall out, and that never gets discussed because it's not as edgy as thinking like, oh yeah, it's all about money, it's all about beauty, it's about the Lamborghini. How is he gonna treat you? And so there's also something very special to people about the other person who is very desired by a lot of people treating them particularly nicely. I mean, you hear this notion of being picked, right? Yeah. And there's mutual picking and everything is changing now too. I mean, the way that there are apps like Bumble where women actually have to say it's yes, I will talk to you. It's not a bidirectional cover, there's asymmetric conversation. Yeah. So again, not on the apps, but I'm fascinated by this because it's human dating behavior. But it's always going to be through the filter of biology. So can the brain outpace evolution when we have millions of years of evolution that men say, I'm attracted to these proportions that will nourish my kids, and women say I'm attracted to these features that say he'll take care of my kids. Now, society's changing in the last 70 years at a crazy rate of change. All this is like getting changed up. Can your brain outpace your evolution, which has been hardwired for millions of years? So we have this real estate in our brain right behind in our forehead. Called the prefrontal cortex, and it's your rule-setting machine. So you can create new rules. What's gonna drive your behavior? Like we can decide what's important in a given set of situations. You actually see this, right? If people go away on retreats or they go to some event, and there's only, let's say again, we're assuming heterosexual relationships here, 10 men and 10 women, they're all heterosexual. Whom you find most attractive will be gauged against the other 9. But in a world in New York City, the distribution is much broader and the mean is shifted, and so you can't beat evolution. You're always going to be constrained by brain wiring. But you can condition certain things, and also sometimes people are selecting somebody who's really nice and really funny and usually get along so well, and of course, there are other criteria too. That there are people who have their list, right? They're like, I want to be with someone who graduated college, or I don't care, or I want to be with somebody who, is physically attracted to, etc. I mean, the reality is that no matter how attractive two people are to one another, like at some point it becomes familiar. But there are certain people who will actually be in a real relationship, a monogamous relationship, and actually become more attracted to the person I'm with, and I think it's something like a pheromone thing. I become very conditioned to them. It's not that no one else becomes attracted to me, but I become very conditioned to them, and I don't know that everyone's like that. I've only been me, but I know that there are some people that get really restless after they've been with the same person for a little while. And sometimes that's psychological, like they never got it out of their system. They married the first person they were with, and other times it could be physiological, both of them. So there's a lot of range on these. I mean, what biology constrains it. It sets some outer bounds on this, like, I don't think, for instance, that we can become attracted to tree frogs, for instance.